What's up, everyone? It's Phoenix here, bringing you guys another podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the crossover again. But more specifically, we are going to discuss probably the number one asked question about the crossover, the most theorized thing about it. And that is, what did Oliver do to save Barry and Kara? What did he give? What did he say to the Monitor that changed everything? Right? What did he give in order for Kara and Barry to survive? And I think there are a few theories, but I think there is a solid answer. First, I think he basically made it so that the destiny cannot be changed at all. That's the destruction of the book with the Chronos era, whatever it's called. He destroyed the book, so nothing can be altered anymore. What is destiny is set. It's all set. Nothing can be changed. Nothing can be altered. All of it is what it is. The second thing is that I think he told the Monitor that they would fight the Anti-Monitor, who is the most powerful being in the DC universe and just in general. So they're going to be battling the Anti-Monitor in 2019, whereas they would have been fighting him in 2024 originally, but I think that was also part of the deal that they would fight him earlier. And not only that, but it wouldn't be enough if they just fought him, right? It wouldn't really be much of a substitute if they just offered to fight them. We know from comic books and just in general, through Flash as well, that it is destined for Kara and Barry, or at least Barry, to disappear in the Crisis. You know, he vanishes in the Crisis happens, and Barry vanishes. And something might happen to Kara, but it's unclear. But we know that Barry disappears. Now, I have a theory, and other people have a theory, that instead of Barry disappearing in the Crisis, Oliver is going to be the one that disappears. Because his show is coming to an end, we're at season 7, we're going on 8, it's more than likely that Arrow will end at the Crisis. Now, if they do that, they need to think about this very carefully, okay? If they set this up, they can't do anything that would spoil it, right? They cannot cancel Arrow until after the crossover, right? Because otherwise, if they cancel it too early, it would kind of give it away, like, yeah, he's disappearing in the crossover. So they would have to wait for Arrow to disappear. Maybe they would do the crossover and he disappears and Arrow basically gets a funeral as the last episode. He's not necessarily dead, he's just gone, disappeared. He's not necessarily dead, but he isn't going to be around. And instead of Arrow taking the reins, now there's not going to be an Arrow, so there's going to be other heroes that are able to take his place, whether it's Kara or Barry or even Batwoman taking the reins and now being the one to control the crossover. Because once Crisis on Infinite Earths happens, then that opens the doors to anything. Like, it would change the Arrowverse permanently, because now Arrow is gone, right? And now we're missing a character. We're missing one of the the main drivers of the entire universe because it's called the Arrowverse. It's not called, the Flashverse or the Supergirlverse. It's called the Arrowverse because that's the original universe. So the question is, if Arrow goes, what comes next? Will Batwoman control the universe? I think it'll always be referred to as the Arrowverse just because it rolls off the tongue nicely. But I don't think it will always be surrounding the Arrow, which is basically what the crossovers lately have been about. We know that Arrow is most likely going to come to an end, and I think that this is the way that they're going to do it. So that's basically it. I mean, there's not much else that Oliver could have sacrificed that would be the equivalent of keeping two superheroes alive, especially those that were destined to die originally. There's not really much that he can do other than to give his own life and also fight the Anti-Monitor. I think those are the two things that he chose to do. Because let's be real here. People are going to die in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's inevitable. It's the Anti-Monitor. He is the most powerful being in all of Arrows, in all of the DC universe. He is the most powerful being there is. He's more powerful than Darkseid, more powerful than all of that. He is the go-to big guy when it comes to powerful villains. So I think that's how Arrow is going to end. I think that Arrow is going to die. The Green Arrow is going to die in Crisis. And the show is essentially going to come to an end, although I do think there are going to be a few episodes to send off Arrow for good. And hopefully, Batwoman will be taking the mantle of basically taking Arrow's place for a successful show, assuming that she gets her own show and it gets really fleshed out. Because I honestly think that Batwoman could easily take over, could become the Batverse, basically. It probably wouldn't be called that, but that's essentially what it would become, especially with Gotham City being introduced and Ruby Rose doing her thing. I do think if Batwoman is to take over, basically as in Arrow's place, that there's definitely going to need some heavy development of that show, so that she can do exactly that. Because Arrow is more likely going to be disappearing into Crisis, this would also open the door for a little bit more room during the crossovers as they do other things, whatever they're planning on doing. But no matter what they do, this will change the entire Arrowverse as we know it. This is a huge risk and a huge thing to deal with because honestly, Arrow is the one that started this whole thing. It's the one that brought all of these shows together. It's the one that everyone knows and mostly loves. And it's honestly, I think it's the most successful show on CW thus far, at least part of the Arrowverse, out of the Arrowverse shows. It's the most successful show thus far. And so it's going to be very different if they go through with this. And I'm going to guess that they are going to go through this. There's definitely going to have to be at least a 4-part series. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. Fall 2019, honestly, it should be pretty soon. I would not do it in December. December is barely fall. I think what they mean by fall is, The shows normally start in about October. So honestly, I think like the first few weeks, they'll spend the first few weeks getting into whatever, the first seasons, the first episodes, and then they're going to have to delve right into Crisis. Honestly, I think they should do it more than 4 nights. I think they should do it for a couple of weeks, like this whole thing is stretched out, so that we get the full thing. Like, I don't want to see any cutouts or anything. Like, I want the full thing. If they're going Crisis on Infinite Earths, it has to be big. And I don't think 4 hours is going to do it. I think they need more than that. So honestly, I think it would be interesting to see a 2-week crossover event where 8 parts, each show gets a part. Maybe it starts with, I don't know, I think it should end with Arrow. With, the Crisis. Arrow should be the last one. And I think it should start with Supergirl. Just because I think Supergirl does better when she starts out and then they transition. Or they could do it like The Flash and then Supergirl and then Legends and then Arrow. But either way, I do think that Arrow, if they're going to do this, if he's going to die, he should die on his own show. Like, that's really the important thing. That if he's going to die, he dies on his own show. Because that's what's more appropriate. Like, we've had character deaths that happened on other shows, and it's kind of awkward. Because these shows, we fall in love with these characters, but their main parts are their dedicated shows. And so if Arrow were to die on Supergirl or to die on Legends, it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't feel right at all. If they're going to kill him off, basically, boot him off, send Arrow off, then he really needs to die at the end. At the end of everything, they get into this huge battle. Maybe Oliver dies at some point, and then they finally defeat the Anti-Monitor at last, and then that's when it finally comes to a close. Definitely should have a big setup and a big finish. Like, you can't mess up Crisis on Infinite Earths. You cannot. There are two storylines that you cannot mess up. And that is Crisis on Infinite Earths and Final Crisis. Now, I don't think they're going to do Final Crisis in a long time. Because, Final Crisis is Final Crisis. It's pretty self-explanatory. That's not going to be for a long time. But if they're doing Infinite Earths, which they are, we know they're doing it, I definitely want to see it really fleshed out. I want to see characters that we know from previous CW shows, like from Smallville. I want to see, what's his name? James Hartley come back as Arrow. I want to see Tom Welling as Superman, the Blur, or whatever. Have these actors come back and have their little short cameos. Like, really delve in to the fan service and also have this whole thing come together. Imagine seeing John Stewart as Green Lantern. Like, that would make sense. And they can do that in the crossover. Like, I think all of their budget is going to blow over this crossover. And you know what? Every single penny would be worth it. Get Linda Carter, get you can't get Christopher Reeve, but get I think Michael Keaton, having a sort of a guest appearance with Michael Keaton being I guess that wouldn't actually make any sense. But just having like little cameos of recognizable actors. We definitely have John Wesley Shipp and all these characters coming back. Actual Smallville coming into this. Get Black Lightning. Get every single person you can from the DC universe, from Arrowverse, from the CW, and get them in this whole thing, and definitely make it. I think they have to do it 8 parts. Like 8 parts would be insane, and they have 8 hours to do it. But it would make the most sense. So that is what I have to say about it. I definitely think that Infinite Crisis on Infinite Earths, is definitely going to be the end of Arrow. I think it's going to happen, which might be a little bit spoilery, but I would be surprised if they continued it and they kept Arrow alive, because honestly, Arrow is coming to an end no matter what. Right? Whether they decide to kill him off or not, they're going to end up ending it. And I guess the perfect way to do that would be by sending him off. Not necessarily killing him, but disappearing in the crisis, which is what Flash would originally do. But now I think it's going to be Oliver who does that. And it would make sense as well. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Comment down below, what do you guys think? What do you want to see in the crossover? And peace out, guys. It's been a blast.